She naked, freezing, and alone. Then she said, "Please imagine I'm your wife." HFY Lyra's spacecraft trembled violently as it descended toward the surface of the unknown planet. The flashing lights of the control panel were chaotic, and the sharp noise of metal creaking against the pressure made her heart race. The emergency alarms screamed in her ears, blending with the static noise of the failing communication system. She gripped the seat tightly, her knuckles turning white, as the ship plunged further into the stormy atmosphere. She tried to steady her breathing, reminding herself that panic was her worst enemy. Every crash landing, every near-death moment in her military career had taught her that survival depended on calmness, on focus. Yet, as the ship began to break apart in the thick clouds above, fear crept into her chest, threatening to undo her carefully constructed resolve. The mission had started out simple enough: rescue a research crew stranded on a desolate planet. But what was supposed to be a routine operation had turned into a nightmare. A catastrophic system failure, a broken thruster, and an incoming storm that no one had predicted had sealed their fate. Lyra was the only one left alive. At least, that's what she assumed as the ship's emergency beacon went dark. The planet below looked barren, cold, gray, and unforgiving. A vast, icy wasteland stretched across the horizon, broken only by jagged peaks that loomed like the remnants of a forgotten world. The ship was losing altitude fast. The control panel flickered, and Lyra knew there was no time left to think. With a deep breath, she grabbed the emergency pod lever and pulled. In an instant, the cabin around her twisted, and the seatbelt locked tightly across her chest. The air around her turned cold as the escape pod shot free from the ship. She watched, helpless, as the once mighty spacecraft disintegrated into pieces in the fiery storm. It was a final, horrible farewell to everything she knew. The pod shot through the storm, its heavy body rattling as it fought against the wind. Lyra could barely hold on. Outside the thick metal window, she could see flashes of lightning slicing through the dark clouds. The ship had been torn apart. She was alone now. Suddenly, the pod jerked to the side. Lyra's body slammed against the restraints, and she gasped in pain. The pod was spinning wildly, spiraling toward the surface. She barely had time to process the situation before the pod slammed into the ground with a deafening crash. For a long, terrible moment, Lyra could not move. Everything around her was dark, and the world felt distant. Her head throbbed, and she fought to regain control of her senses. The emergency lighting inside the pod flickered on, illuminating the cramped space. Her heart pounded in her chest as she slowly came to her senses. She was alive. But for how long? With great effort, she unclipped herself from the seat and crawled toward the pod's hatch. The world outside was an expanse of endless snow, a frozen landscape that stretched in every direction. The cold cut through the pod, creeping in like 1,000 needles. Lyra glanced at the control panel, but it was useless. The systems were completely fried. She couldn't contact anyone, couldn't send out a distress signal. Her communication systems had gone dead with the ship's crash. She was on her own. She took a deep breath and forced herself to focus. There had to be a way out of this. She had survived worse: storms, hostile environments, deadly alien worlds. She made it this far because she could endure. She was an officer, she was trained for this, but even she knew that this was different. This planet wasn't just cold, it was lifeless. The wind howled outside, and a thick layer of frost already covered the pod's windows. There were no signs of life, no signals, no signs of anything. Lyra grabbed her survival pack from beneath the seat. Her fingers trembled as she opened it, but she forced herself to remain calm. Inside, she found the basics: a thermal blanket, a flare gun, water rations, and a small first aid kit. She looked out the window again, seeing the bleak expanse of snow stretching far beyond her view. She had to move. If she stayed inside the pod, the cold would kill her in a matter of hours. She opened the pod's hatch and stepped into the harsh wind, the freezing air biting at her skin. The moment she stepped outside, she knew there was no turning back. Her feet crunched in the snow as she took cautious steps, her breath turning into visible clouds in the icy air. The wind howled around her, making every step feel like it took all her strength. She had no idea where she was, but she couldn't stay near the wreckage. If someone came looking for her, they wouldn't find her if she simply waited. Lyra trudged forward, her boots sinking into the snow with each step. The landscape was barren, not a single living thing in sight. A distant mountain range loomed, its peaks sharp and jagged against the dull sky. She squinted against the wind, but there was nothing to guide her. No signs of civilization, no landmarks. Minutes passed, then hours. Her muscles ached from the cold, and her skin was raw from exposure. She wrapped the thermal blanket around herself, but it offered little relief against the harsh winds. The snow seemed endless, and the cold seeped deep into her bones. She had lost track of time, but the pain in her limbs told her it had been far too long since the crash. She thought back to the crash, to the chaos that had unfolded when her ship came apart. Her crew was gone. There was no chance of survival for them. Lyra had been a part of a team, a family, and now that family was gone. The cold was nothing compared to the emptiness she felt inside. But that emptiness wasn't something she could afford to focus on. She needed to survive. She had always prided herself on her resilience, her ability to endure, and now was the time to prove it. She had to find shelter, any shelter, to stay alive. The longer she wandered, the more her thoughts began to cloud. She couldn't think about the lost crew members anymore. She couldn't afford to think about what had gone wrong. She needed to focus on staying alive. And yet, despite the cold and isolation, she couldn't help but feel the weight of their loss press down on her. The absence of her fellow soldiers, of the ones she had trained with, fought beside, laughed with, it was an ache that didn't go away. There was no escaping the fact that she was alone. After what seemed like an eternity, Lyra stumbled upon something. A faint glow in the distance caught her eye, a soft, greenish light that shone through the snow like a beacon. It was faint, but it was enough. She had to reach it. She forced her exhausted body to move toward the light, her heart racing with both hope and fear. As she drew closer, the light grew brighter, and she found herself standing before what appeared to be an ancient structure, half buried in the ice. It was like nothing she had ever seen, a massive alien structure with strange markings and symbols etched into the surface. For a moment, Lyra just stood there, frozen in place. What was it? Who had built it? She had no answers, only the cold air biting at her skin and the strange, eerie silence of the planet around her. But she knew one thing for certain. It was her only chance for survival. Taking a deep breath, she stepped toward the entrance of the structure, the mysterious light beckoning her forward. She had no idea what awaited her inside, but it was the only hope she had left. Lyra approached the entrance of the alien structure with a mix of curiosity and dread. The glow that had drawn her here seemed to pulse gently, like the heartbeat of something ancient and powerful. She had no idea what awaited her inside, but she knew she couldn't afford to stand outside for much longer. The cold was beginning to creep deeper into her bones, and even her thermal blanket offered little warmth against the relentless wind. With a deep breath, she stepped through the threshold, feeling the temperature shift immediately. The inside of the structure was unlike anything she had ever seen. The walls, made of smooth, dark stone, seemed to absorb the light, casting long shadows across the space. The air was warmer, but it felt heavier, thick with an energy she couldn't explain. She carefully moved further into the chamber, her boots echoing against the stone floor. Her eyes darted around, scanning for any signs of movement, but there was nothing, only the silence that surrounded her. It was strange, unsettling. The quiet in this place felt unnatural, like the building itself was holding its breath. As she moved deeper, she noticed something even more unusual. Strange symbols and markings were etched into the walls. They glowed faintly, much like the light outside, but their meanings were indecipherable. They weren't anything she had ever seen before, not even the alien languages she had encountered in her past missions. These symbols seemed different, older, maybe even forgotten. Lyra couldn't help but run her fingers along the wall, feeling the smoothness of the stone. She hoped that maybe, just maybe, these markings held the answers she so desperately needed. Her fingers traced the curves and angles, memorizing the strange shapes. They didn't make sense, but there was something comforting about them. It was as if the markings were speaking to her, inviting her to stay to discover their story. She took a few more cautious steps, her eyes now adjusting to the dim light. The structure was vast, stretching far beyond what she could see in the distance. It felt like she had entered the heart of something ancient, something that had been waiting for her or maybe for someone like her. But why? Her mind raced with questions. She needed answers. The crash, the storm, the silence of the planet. Everything felt connected, and yet she had no way of understanding it all. She was alone, lost in this alien place far from the crew she had failed to save. She shook her head, pushing those thoughts aside. She had to survive. That was all that mattered now. As she ventured deeper into the structure, she noticed a change. The air began to hum softly, like a low vibration that tickled the back of her mind. It was almost like the walls themselves were alive, responding to her presence. The hum grew louder and she stopped in her tracks, her heart racing. Something was happening. A low, rhythmic light flickered in the distance. Lyra's breath caught in her throat as she saw the source. A large, circular platform in the center of the room, glowing with an eerie blue light. It was like nothing she had ever seen. The platform seemed to pulse in time with the hum, and in the center, a holographic image began to form. Lyra's heart skipped a beat. The figure that appeared in the center of the platform was unlike anything she had expected. It was a woman tall, with features both alien and strangely familiar. Her skin was a pale blue, with intricate patterns that shimmered across her face and arms. Her eyes glowed with an unnatural light, piercing through the darkness like twin stars. The woman's voice, soft and calm, echoed through the room, though her lips did not move. "Please imagine I'm your wife." Lyra froze, her mind struggling to process the words. The hologram's message was cryptic, a strange and unsettling request. She couldn't make sense of it. Why would the hologram speak to her like that? And why use such intimate language? She wasn't sure whether to feel confused, alarmed, or curious. But as the hologram continued, its presence didn't seem threatening. There was something comforting in the way the woman's image glowed, like a beacon in the darkness. It was as if the figure wasn't just speaking to her, but to something deeper inside her. Lyra's thoughts became muddled as she tried to understand. "What does this mean?" she whispered aloud, her voice lost in the quiet hum of the chamber. But there was no reply. The hologram remained, its eyes locked on hers. It felt as if it was waiting for her to respond, to acknowledge something she couldn't quite put her finger on. Lyra stepped closer to the platform, the glow of the image reflecting off her face. She didn't understand the meaning of the words, but something inside her told her to keep watching, to stay in the presence of the image. The more she looked at the hologram, the more it felt familiar. Her heart ached for reasons she couldn't explain, and for the first time since the crash, she felt a spark of something, a connection. Suddenly, the light around the hologram shifted. The woman's image flickered and dissolved, leaving Lyra standing alone once again in the cold, dark chamber. The hum stopped. The silence returned, heavier than before. Lyra stood there, her mind spinning. She could feel the weight of the message hanging in the air, but it made no sense. The request to imagine the hologram as her wife, what did it mean? Why would it ask that of her? There had to be a reason, she thought. There had to be a purpose behind this message. It wasn't random. Nothing on this planet was random. Her head was spinning. She tried to process everything, the strange structure, the alien symbols, the message from the hologram, but nothing seemed to fit together. It was like a puzzle with pieces she couldn't find. Lyra leaned against the stone wall, closing her eyes for a moment. She needed to think. She needed to make sense of this. But the more she tried, the more the image of the holographic woman seemed to linger in her mind. Her glowing eyes, her calm voice, the strange request. It all felt so surreal. For a long while, Lyra remained in the chamber, trying to understand. The cold from outside no longer seemed to matter, and the hunger gnawing at her stomach faded into the background. All that mattered was the feeling that something was waiting for her, something she didn't yet understand. Eventually, she stood up again, pushing away the overwhelming confusion. She couldn't stay here forever. Whatever this place was, it had a purpose, and she needed to find out what it was. She couldn't afford to wait. Lyra moved away from the platform and headed deeper into the structure, feeling the air grow heavier with each step. The walls seemed to pulse with energy, responding to her presence. It was like the building itself was alive, guiding her forward. As she ventured on, she began to notice more strange features. The walls weren't just stone. They were lined with intricate patterns, and strange symbols appeared in the gaps, glowing faintly. It was like the structure was communicating with her, offering clues, but in a language she couldn't yet decode. The deeper she went, the more the structure seemed to open up, revealing vast chambers and corridors. It was as if the place was a labyrinth, but one with no clear exit, only more questions. Lyra had no idea where she was going, but she felt an undeniable pull, like the structure was guiding her to something important. Finally, she reached another chamber. This one was different. It was vast, stretching high above her, with strange, floating platforms hanging in midair. The walls here were covered in more symbols, but they were clearer now. Lyra could almost feel them, like they were calling to her. She took a step forward, her heart pounding in her chest. She had to know what it all meant. She had to know why she had been brought here. Lyra stood motionless in the vast chamber, her eyes scanning the floating platforms above her head. They seemed to hover effortlessly, their edges glowing faintly with the same eerie blue light that had filled the earlier chambers. She couldn't shake the feeling that the structure around her was alive, breathing in rhythm with her every step. It was as if the walls were watching her, waiting for her to make the next move. She took a cautious step forward, her boots clicking softly against the stone floor. The chamber was filled with an oppressive silence, the only sound being her own breath and the faint hum of energy in the air. It felt as though the space stretched on forever, the platforms disappearing into the shadows above her. Her pulse quickened, and she couldn't help but wonder if this was the heart of whatever had brought her here, if this was where she would finally find the answers. But answers to what? She didn't know. The cryptic message from the hologram still lingered in her mind, its meaning unclear. Please imagine I'm your wife. What did it want from her? Why had it chosen her? As she walked deeper into the chamber, the strange symbols on the walls seemed to glow brighter, pulsing with an energy that matched the rhythm of her heartbeat. It was as if they were trying to communicate with her, urging her to understand their meaning. She paused, her fingers reaching out to trace one of the symbols, but just as she touched it, a loud noise broke the silence. Startled, she pulled her hand back, her heart racing. The noise had come from somewhere above her, from one of the floating platforms. She couldn't see what had caused it, but she felt the air shift like something, or someone, was moving through the space. The room seemed to pulse with life, and Lyra's instinct told her to be alert. She had been in dangerous situations before, but nothing like this. She couldn't help but feel as though she was no longer alone. Suddenly, a figure appeared, stepping out of the shadows from one of the platforms. Lyra froze, her breath catching in her throat as she watched the figure descend slowly, almost gliding down to the ground. It was a being like no other she had seen before, neither human nor anything she recognized. It was tall, with an elongated body and smooth, pale skin that shimmered faintly in the dim light. Its eyes were large and black, with no visible pupils, giving it an otherworldly appearance. Lyra instinctively reached for the small blaster at her side, but the creature made no move toward her. Instead, it stood still, its dark eyes fixed on her, studying her as though it were waiting for something. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Lyra felt the tension in the air, thick and palpable. Her mind raced, trying to process what she was seeing. Was this a friendly encounter? A hostile one? She had no idea, but one thing was clear. She had never encountered anything like this before. The creature took a step forward, its movement fluid and graceful. It didn't speak, but somehow, Lyra could feel that it was communicating with her, its presence sending a strange, calming energy through her body. It wasn't like anything she had ever experienced. It was as though the creature's very being radiated peace, even though it was unlike anything she could ever understand. Then it spoke, not with words, but with a voice in her mind, soft and melodic, yet full of purpose. "We have been waiting for you." Lyra blinked in shock, her hand still hovering near her blaster. She wasn't sure how to respond, or if she even should. The voice wasn't threatening, but it carried a weight of something ancient, something beyond her comprehension. You've been waiting for me?" she asked aloud, her voice trembling despite her best efforts to remain calm. The creature nodded, its large, black eyes never leaving hers. "Yes, you are the one we have been waiting for, the human who will bridge the gap." Lyra's confusion deepened. Bridge the gap? She had no idea what the creature was talking about. "What do you mean?" For a moment, the creature was silent, as if considering how to explain. Then, in her mind, the voice continued. "We are the Jarin, a species that once thrived across the stars, but we lost something, something vital, the ability to feel, the ability to connect. We are ancient, and we have forgotten the most important thing." Lyra's heart began to pound faster. "You lost the ability to feel?" She didn't understand. How was that even possible? How could a species lose something so fundamental to life itself? "Yes," the Jarin replied. "We once shared the emotions of the universe, connected to everything around us. But over time, that connection faded. We grew cold, distant. We lost our humanity. We need you, the humans, to help us reconnect. You have something we no longer possess." Lyra felt a strange mixture of disbelief and awe. This alien being, this Jarin, was asking her for help. Asking for something so deeply personal. It didn't make sense, but somehow it did. She had always known that humanity was different from other species. There was something unique about the way humans connected with each other, something that set them apart. But could she really help these aliens? She swallowed hard, trying to keep her voice steady. What do you want me to do? How can I help you? The Jaren took another step forward, and for the first time, Lyra noticed that it wasn't just its body that shimmered. Its entire being seemed to radiate a faint light, pulsing with energy, as if its very essence was made of something beyond the physical. You have something we need, the Jaren's voice echoed in her mind. Your emotions, your connection to others. We cannot reclaim what we have lost on our own, but you can help us. Your species is the key to restoring what we have lost. Only through your emotions, your bonds, can we begin to reconnect to the universe. Lyra's mind raced. The Jaren wanted her emotions. Wanted her to share something so personal, so human with them. It was a lot to ask, and part of her wanted to refuse. She had no idea if this was some kind of trap, some manipulation, but something deep inside her told her that this wasn't a lie. This wasn't a trick. The Jaren paused, as if sensing her hesitation. You do not trust us, it said, its voice full of understanding. But we are not asking for your pity, we are not asking for your sympathy, we are asking for your strength, your humanity. We have the knowledge, but we lack the heart. You can help us restore what we have lost, not just for us, but for all of us, humans and Jaren alike. Lyra closed her eyes for a moment, trying to process the weight of the Jaren's words. It was overwhelming. Could she really help these beings? Could she, one human, bring back the emotions and connections that they had lost? What would that mean for her? For humanity? She opened her eyes and looked at the Jaren. There was something about it, about all of this, that felt important. It was as if the entire universe was waiting for her answer, waiting for her to make the decision that would change everything. Lyra took a deep breath and stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for certain. She couldn't walk away now. I'll help you, she said quietly, her voice steady. I'll help you reconnect. The Jaren's eyes softened, and the hum in the room grew louder. The air seemed to shift, filled with a new energy, a new possibility. The alien being nodded once, a gesture that seemed to hold the weight of centuries of waiting. Thank you, the Jaren said. Together we will restore what was lost. And in that moment, Lyra knew that everything was about to change. She had stepped into something far bigger than herself, something that would challenge everything she thought she knew about life, the universe, and the bonds that connected them all. Lyra stood before the Jaren, her mind racing with everything she had just agreed to. She had promised to help them, to bring back the emotions they had lost. The weight of the decision felt heavier with every passing second, and the world around her seemed to shift. She wasn't sure what to expect next, but she knew that whatever happened, her life would never be the same again. The Jaren's presence seemed to grow even stronger now. The energy in the chamber pulsed in rhythm with the beating of Lyra's heart, a deep, resonant hum that filled the air. It was like the structure itself was alive, reacting to the agreement she had made. The creature's black eyes studied her, a quiet understanding in them. Its body shimmered in the dim light, like a star moving through the dark of space. There was no mistaking the power that radiated from the Jaren, but there was also something fragile about it, something lost. It seemed as if they were all waiting for something, waiting for her to lead them down a path they couldn't walk on their own. You've made a great choice, the Jaren said, its voice no longer just in her mind but spoken aloud, though its voice still carried the same soft, melodic quality. But you must understand, this is not just a simple task. What you are offering us is not just your help, but your very essence. It is not a gift we take lightly. Lyra's stomach tightened. The thought of sharing her emotions, her very humanity, with beings she barely understood was daunting. She had always guarded her feelings, even from those closest to her. To give that away, to help these beings rediscover what they had lost, felt like stepping into the unknown. But she had already made the promise. There was no turning back now. I understand, Lyra said, her voice steady. What do I need to do? The Jaren nodded, its large eyes never leaving hers. You must help us unlock the connection. We can't do it alone. We've spent centuries searching for a way to restore what was lost, but we didn't realize the key was in something as simple as emotion. You, your species, still have that connection to the universe, to each other. We need you to show us how to feel again. Lyra swallowed. She didn't fully understand, but she knew that the Jaren were right. She had something they couldn't get on their own: human connection. The deep, unexplainable bond that tied people together, even in the hardest times. But could she really help these creatures feel it? The Jaren moved closer, its shimmering body casting a soft glow in the dark chamber. "You will be the bridge," it said softly. "Not just for us, but for all who have lost their way. The universe needs balance, Lyra. Emotions are not just for the weak or the strong, they are what connect everything. They are the force that binds life to the stars." Lyra's head was spinning. It was so much to take in. Emotions were what connected everything. The idea seemed simple, yet it was so much deeper than anything she had learned during her military training. She had always thought of survival as a matter of strategy, strength, and willpower. She had never realized that emotions, love, fear, joy, and even pain could be the most powerful force in the universe. "Do you understand now?" the Jaren asked, its voice gentle but insistent. "You must not hold back. To truly help us, you must allow us to experience everything you feel, the love you have for your people, the fear of being alone, the pain of loss, and the joy of hope. You will share your memories, your connections." Lyra felt a surge of fear. She wasn't sure she could do it. Could she truly let these aliens into her heart? Could she show them the depths of what it meant to be human? She had always kept her emotions tightly controlled, even in the most difficult situations. Sharing them felt like exposing a part of herself she had spent years hiding from even those closest to her. But then she remembered her crew, the friends she had lost, the ones who had trusted her to keep them safe. She remembered their faces, their laughter, their courage. She couldn't bring them back, but maybe, just maybe, she could help something greater than herself. She could help the Jaren reconnect to something they had lost. And in doing so, she could help the universe. Taking a deep breath, Lyra nodded. "I'll do it. I'll share everything." The Jaren stepped back, and the chamber around them began to shift. The air hummed louder now, almost vibrating with energy. The stone walls seemed to pulse, and the light from the platforms above intensified. Lyra felt a rush of warmth wash over her, and she realized that the temperature in the room had risen. It was as though the entire place was alive, reacting to the decision she had made. The Jaren extended its hand, and Lyra hesitated only for a moment before placing her own hand in its. The contact was strange. The Jaren's skin felt like smooth glass, cool to the touch, but when she made contact, she felt a jolt of energy pass through her. It was as if her very essence was being pulled from her body, flowing into the creature before her. The world around her seemed to blur. Colors and shapes swirled in her vision, and she felt herself being pulled into something vast, something incomprehensible. Her memories, her emotions, her entire life, everything she had ever felt, began to unravel before her. It was like she was reliving every moment at once. The joy of seeing a loved one after a long mission, the fear of losing someone she cared about, the pain of failure, and the bittersweet feeling of letting go. The Jaren's presence surrounded her, and she could feel it absorbing her emotions like a sponge soaking up water. It wasn't painful, but it was overwhelming. The memories, the feelings, the rawness of her humanity, it all poured out of her, flooding the room. She felt herself becoming more and more connected to the alien before her, and she realized with a shock that it wasn't just taking her emotions. It was sharing in them, experiencing them as if they were its own. The Jaren's voice filled her mind again, soft and calm. "You are doing well, Lyra. We can feel it, your connection to life, to those you have lost. We can feel your love, your grief, your strength." Lyra's breath hitched. It was as if the creature was becoming a part of her, and she was becoming a part of it. She could feel its emotions too, though they were unlike her own. They were alien, distant, yet somehow familiar. She could sense its longing, its desire to reconnect to something lost, something vital. And in that moment she understood. The Jaren weren't just looking for a way to feel, they were searching for a way to live again. The energy in the room intensified, and Lyra felt her body grow weak, as if she was being drained. But at the same time, something incredible was happening. The Jaren was no longer distant, cold, and emotionless. She could feel the warmth inside it, the spark of life that had been dormant for centuries. She could feel the shift happening, the gradual restoration of something long lost. Suddenly, the Jaren's form shifted. The glowing light around it grew brighter, and Lyra could feel the connection between them reaching its peak. The energy surged through her, and she gasped, her body shaking. It was as though the Jaren's transformation was happening through her, as if she were the vessel that carried the power of the universe itself. And then, just as quickly as it had started, the energy began to fade. The connection lessened, and Lyra found herself standing once again in the vast chamber. The Jarin stood before her, its form no longer shimmering with an unnatural light. It was still alien, but it was different, alive in a way it hadn't been before. The Jarin turned its dark eyes to her, and this time there was something new in them, something that resembled gratitude, hope. "You have done it, Lyra. You have restored the connection. You have given us what we have longed for." Lyra felt exhausted, but a sense of peace settled over her. She had done it. She had helped the Jarin reconnect to what they had lost, and in doing so she had found something deeper within herself, a connection to the universe, to life, to everything that mattered. It wasn't just the Jarin who had been changed. She had been changed too. The days after the Jarin's transformation passed in a blur for Lyra. She barely had time to process everything that had happened, everything she had experienced. The Jarin had changed, that much was certain. Their once distant, cold forms now glowed with a faint warmth, their presence filled with something deeper, something Lyra could only describe as humanity. The connection she had helped restore was tangible now, and in some ways it felt like she had not just helped the Jarin, but also herself. As she stood in the vast chamber once more, she felt the weight of the silence around her. The energy from before had faded, but the atmosphere was still different. The air seemed lighter somehow. The hum that had once filled the room with tension was gone, replaced by a calm that filled her heart. The Jarin moved around her, no longer the mysterious, distant beings they once were. They interacted with her now in ways that felt more natural, more human. They shared glances, not in a formal way, but in a way that was filled with understanding. They no longer seemed like an ancient species searching for something they couldn't have. They were alive now in a way that went beyond mere physical existence. They had found what they had lost. Lyra looked up at the sky through the tall windows of the chamber, where the snow outside was beginning to melt. It was as if the entire planet had been waiting for this moment, waiting for the Jarin to reconnect with something greater than themselves. The harsh, frozen landscape had begun to soften, the edges of the world no longer so sharp and cruel. "Do you feel it, Lyra?" a voice behind her asked. Lyra turned to see the Jarin who had first spoken to her. It was standing in the doorway, its eyes calm, almost serene. There was a new quality in its expression now, one that wasn't there before. It wasn't just gratitude, it was something more. The Jarin had been waiting for this moment for centuries, and now they were finally free. Free to feel, to connect, to exist without the burden of their lost emotions. Lyra nodded slowly. "Yes, I feel it. It's different, lighter." The Jarin approached her and stood beside her, looking out at the planet together. "It is as though the entire world is waking up." It was frozen both inside and out, but now the thaw has begun. The thaw, Lyra thought about it for a moment. It wasn't just the planet that had thawed, she had changed too. The emotions she had shared with the Jarin, the love, the fear, the loss, had stirred something inside her. She had always been a survivor, someone who kept her emotions buried beneath layers of discipline and control. But now she understood something deeper. Emotions were not just weaknesses to be hidden. They were powerful forces, ones that could heal, that could connect. She had helped the Jarin rediscover this truth, but in doing so, she had also found her own truth. Her emotions were what made her human. They were what made her strong. "Do you think it will last?" Lyra asked quietly, her gaze still fixed on the melting snow outside. The Jarin turned its head, its black eyes reflecting the faint light. "It will last. The connection is real now. It cannot be undone." Lyra took a deep breath, her chest rising and falling with the effort. The weight that had settled there after the crash, after the loss of her crew, was beginning to lift. It wasn't gone, not entirely. She still carried the grief, the loneliness, the regret. But they no longer consumed her. She had found something in this alien world that she hadn't even known she was searching for, a way to heal, a way to move forward. "You know," Lyra said, her voice softer now, "when I first got here, I thought I was alone. I thought I was the last one left from my crew. I didn't know how I could survive, how I could keep going. But now I understand. I'm not alone. I never was." The Jarin looked at her, and for a moment it was silent. Then it spoke, its voice filled with a kind of warmth that made Lyra's heart swell. "You were never alone, Lyra. You were always connected, even when you couldn't see it. That is the power of humanity. You carry with you not just your own memories, but the memories of all who have come before you. You carry their emotions, their strength. You are never truly alone." Lyra felt the truth of the Jaren's words deep in her soul. It was something she had never understood before. She had always carried the weight of her mission, the burden of responsibility, without fully realizing that the connections she had made, both with her crew and with the world around her, were what kept her going. It wasn't just about survival. It was about the people, the feelings, the bonds that kept you anchored to something greater than yourself. The Jaren placed a hand on her shoulder, a gesture that felt oddly comforting. "We are ready to rebuild now," it said. "The universe has been waiting for us to reconnect. We are ready to share what we have learned to help others who have lost their way." Lyra turned to face it, her heart swelling with a sense of purpose. "And what about Earth?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What about the humans?" The Jaren's eyes gleamed, as if it had been waiting for this question. "We will find them. We will share what we have learned. You will take this knowledge back with you to your people. The connections between all life in the universe are deeper than you can imagine. You are the first step in restoring that balance." Lyra felt a rush of hope, something she hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about connecting, about reaching out to the world beyond herself and helping others do the same. She had been given a purpose, a new mission. She was no longer the last human stranded on a frozen planet. She was the bridge between two species, the one who had helped them find their way back to each other. She knew it wouldn't be easy. She knew the road ahead would be long and difficult, but she was ready. She was ready to share what she had learned, to help humanity reconnect with the emotions and bonds that made them strong. And she would do it with the Jaren by her side, their once-lost connection now restored. "I'll do it," Lyra said, her voice steady. "I'll go back, I'll bring them the message, I'll help them reconnect." The Jaren smiled, a gesture that was both strange and beautiful in its simplicity. "We knew you would, Lyra. You are not just a survivor. You are a healer, a bringer of balance. Together we will restore what was lost." As Lyra looked out at the snow-covered landscape once more, she felt something inside her shift. The world was no longer a cold, empty place. It was filled with possibility, with hope. The thaw had begun, both on this alien planet and in her own heart. She wasn't alone anymore. She had found a new family, a new purpose, and she would carry that with her as she returned to Earth, ready to share the gift of connection with a world that desperately needed it. The journey ahead would be difficult. There would be challenges, doubts, and obstacles. But Lyra knew one thing for certain. She had the strength to face them. And she would do it not alone, but with the power of connection, the power of emotion, and the power of the bonds that tied everything together. With that thought in her heart, she took a final, deep breath and turned away from the window, ready to begin the next chapter of her journey.